Hi. Hi. Hi, welcome. Good afternoon. Our topic today is how AI will affect the workplace, the workforce in the fifth industrial revolution, this period in which we are really thinking about how machines are used, how machines and humans interact, hopefully for the better. And we're going to be joined in a minute by two really amazing leaders in this field, thinkers in this field. But I wanted to start with a question for all of you, the basic one at the heart of this session, which is how many of you, show of hands, look at AI in the way it's currently developing and see it as a positive force in our economy? About a third. And how many see it more as a negative force, disruptive in a negative way than a positive? So a lot of optimists in the room. We're going to explore this topic in depth now with our speakers. Lily Gangas, please come out. Lily is the Chief Technology Community Officer of the Kapor Center, which is focused on developing Oakland as a tech hub that prioritizes diversity, inclusion, and positive impact. And Dr. Frida Poli. Frida, come on out. Frida's the CEO of Pymetrics, which is a company focused on improving the efficiency and diversity of hiring through behavioral science and AI. So thanks for chatting with me and all of us today. I wanted to start with my Time colleague, Alana Samuels, is here, and Alana covers this very topic for Time. And one of the things she has found in her reporting is that a lot of companies seem to genuinely want to be preparing workers, reskilling, upskilling workers for this massive change that we're really, in many ways, just at the beginning of, but find it either too hard to do or often, particularly for public companies with a quarter-to-quarter focus, too expensive really to do. Could each of you, maybe starting with you, Lily, give us a report card on how you think we're doing as a society in this reskilling process as we enter the fifth industrial revolution?
Sure, thank you. Well, I would say that it's more expensive not to do it. But I think right now we are experiencing the revolution that AI is going to bring, that a lot of times when we think about it, we think of displacement, but it's also opportunity. And right now we're expecting that about 2030, this is going to be a 15 trillion industry. Yet, when we don't have people that look like me, people that look like my mom or my relatives at the table, we're really missing a huge chunk of the potential talent. And so I really think that right now the current systems of education, upskilling are broken. And so for us to really be able to create a new solution, we need new systems. Right now, the debt for a four-year university is 1.4 trillion across the US. There's studies that show if we were able to get rid of that debt, how much more could we bring into the economy? And so I think that shows that the need and the gaps that we currently have of not being able to stay at the pace that the industry is moving, that technology could moving as we educate our current workforce. What's also more importantly is to understand that the current talent at the table, it's not your typical talent anymore. Four-year universities worked for some, not for many, and it's not going to work for as we continue to go forward in the next few years, because there's a huge population of the new non-traditional talent, which is going to be the new norm. And who are they? They are working, they're over 25, they have families to support, they need current skills to be built now, so then that way they can provide for their families and continue to learn. The question is that who is investing in this segment? When I was doing some of my work out in Oakland, what we specifically saw when we surveyed about 16 different of the big tech companies, we saw that there was $0 going into community colleges. And when you take a look at the largest percentage of potential talent that should be entering, and you're investing $0, I think it's more expensive not to do it. And so I hope that we will continue to increase.
So before I move to Frida, I want to press you on the report card. You don't have to do an A to F, but do you think we are starting to get on the wrong track, not even in the game, on our way, a little misguided? Like, where are we as a society grappling with this?
I'm an optimist.
Okay.
I'm also a problem solver. I really do think that where we're at right now, AI is it's in infancy, and I think that we could do better. We can and we will, if we make sure that we have the right representation there. If I was to give it an A to an F type of, I would give it a C. Well, I think the reason is that we really have to be honest with ourselves. Like, we can't do incremental change anymore in order to really see the difference in a way that's more equitable to everybody, not just in the US, but globally. We really need to create new systems, and that's going to take new time. But I specifically at the Caper Center, where we do all of our work focused on the intersection of tech, social justice, it's really important that we have those perspectives. But we also are investing in tech companies are closing gaps of access through Caper Capital. We're also educating students through Smash to build the next generation. And I'm on the board for AI for All, so I'm super optimistic when I look at middle school and high school girls being able to create algorithms that are creating autonomous vehicles for fun. And then once they leave the classroom, they go and they're educating 10 times more students. So I'm really, really optimistic from the future that we have. But we want to make sure that we're creating the equitable pathways for them to join us.
Right, thank you. Frida.
So is the question, where are we at in terms of reskilling, or where is AI at, or what's the?
I think the question is how we're at the beginning of a massive disruption, transformation in the economy.
Right.
How are we doing? I admit this is a broad essay question, not a narrow one.
Right.
But how are we doing as a society that has to prepare our workforce for that transformation?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would echo Lily's statements. I personally think it's less about report card. I think we're more in the pre-K phase of the situation, and we're not even in middle school, high school, or college. And so I think we have look at the problem that way, which is I'm a mom. I have this joke that I tell, which is that AI is like teenage sex. Everybody says they're doing it, but nobody really knows what it is. And I think that that kind of captures the spirit of the day, which is that a lot of people are saying that they're investing in AI, doing these things, and so on. Not really clear exactly where we're at. And I think that when you think about reskilling and the opportunity that technology platforms powered by artificial intelligence can have, it's massive. I think that really what we're struggling with now is a global matching problem. So we have all these people that were trained in jobs of the past. They need to be moved to jobs of the future. We are stuck in systems that still look at the resume, which is essentially just your past history, to try to understand what you could possibly do in the future. I think we have to get away from the systems of looking at someone as a catalog of what I've done, and more looking at them for their soft skills and their potential. And once you have systems that are focused on solving this matching problem at scale, and then addressing a lot of the educational concerns that Lily brought up, because I think education is really being disrupted by this idea of, do we need four-year degrees anymore? What does my pedigree even mean? And I think all of it is a matching problem. And then once we've figured out the right match between people who have been in historical industries to new industries, and how then do we use new forms of education to retrain them? I think that's where we need to go, and I think we really are in like the pre-K phase of that, if at all. And it's going to take public and private sector investment, and every institution I know from the WEF on down is basically concerned with these issues, but I don't think anyone's really come up with and here's the solution.
I wanted to step back with each of you, because you both have really interesting personal journeys that brought you to this topic. Starting with you, Frida, because you started in a really different place, and the path that took you where you are. If you'd tell the group.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I was one person that was sort of facing this, reskilling problem, right? So I was a, 30-plus-year-old single parent who had been, in science for a long time. I then, because of circumstances, became a single parent, sole breadwinner, making $37,000 a year, and thinking, something needs to change here because this equation isn't going to work for me in the future. And then essentially went to business school, was lucky to get a fellowship, and from there saw essentially the problem of rematching of careers happening in real time. And so as a scientist, knew that we had a better way to look at people's soft skills rather than focusing on their resumes, which again, my resume in science was 50 pages long and told me nothing about what I could possibly do in the business world. And then using ethically designed artificial intelligence to help me and anyone who was in my situation understand what I could be doing next in the world. And that's how Pymetrics came to be. And so the premise behind Pymetrics is that we use better data and ethically designed artificial intelligence to really make the matching of people to jobs, whether it's in hiring, whether it's in mobility, whether it's in reskilling, far, far more effective than the platforms that we have today. And also, by the way, allowing for far greater diversity in the workforce than we have today. So we have better matching, more accurate matching, people that are happier, better, more satisfied, and oh, by the way, a far more diverse workforce as a result of that, which is, kind of interesting, right? That, objective technology can actually produce a more diverse workforce.
Yeah, so one follow-up. Our Times Chief People Officer is in the front row here, ahead of our hiring. We're doing a lot of hiring. We get resumes, we meet candidates, we try to put them with a large group of our employees at all levels, diverse group of our employees. But we're doing it the traditional way, resume, conversation. Are we doing it wrong?
I mean, look, nobody's doing it wrong, but I think it's not going to scale for the future. And I think it's going to have all of the problems that we have today, which is that, anyone that has ever hired off a resume, unfortunately, most people are taking 6 seconds to evaluate a resume. There have been all sorts of peer-reviewed studies showing that if you use a resume to hire, you are less likely to hire women, certainly people of color, older workers, and also people that don't come from prestigious Ivy League backgrounds, right? So I think that there are a lot of flaws in the current system, and so we have amazing room for improvement. That's the way that I would think about it. I'm like Lily, I'm an optimist. But at the end of the day, as our head of behavioral science says, hiring is hard, and so is reskilling, and so is everything. So I don't think we should just be like beating up on ourselves for doing it wrong. I just think there's a lot of potential for doing it a lot better.
Are there less technical approaches? Should we be taking names off before we circulate resumes? Are there?
Yeah, I think there's all sorts of process-based approaches that one can use as well. Anything that essentially will blind you to information that's not relevant. Orchestras basically went from 5% to 35% participation of women just by putting up a curtain. So literally all they did was put up a curtain between the person that was evaluating the performer, and just removing that demographic information about gender increased women's participation by 600%, which is astounding, right? And so that's the type of thing that we need to see both in process and technology at scale, I think, to really change not just hiring, but also how we can use AI to help us with this massive reskilling problem that we're faced with now.
Lily, tell us about your journey. You were at Booz Allen and Accenture, innovating there. How did you end up at Kapor and committed to this topic?
Well, first of all, according to those stats, I shouldn't even be in this room. The fact that I'm an immigrant, was raised by a single parent, didn't speak English at all. Math was my language, which is probably why I went into engineering. Fast forward, I really just loved math and science, and I had an amazing teachers along the way. And I think it's one of those aspects where I don't want folks like me to rely on luck, right, or rely on that teacher that's like, hey, you have good grades, so you got to keep going. But I was fortunate that I had that support system. Fast forward, went into electrical engineering, USC for all the Trojans. But then found myself being in classified environments, working at Raytheon, actually. That's where I started my career as a multidisciplinary engineer, working in the aerospace industry for about 6+ years. I was working on things that I probably till this day have no idea how they're getting used, where they're getting used. But it took really my last project, it's funny enough, it was an unclassified project, where I learned that I was working on simulations for ballistic missiles shooting out of submarines. And when you're in your mid-20s and you're thinking, wow, what do I want to do with my talent, my time? And just thinking that I thought I had made, I made the American dream. I got my 6-figure job. I'm supporting my family. I'm doing what I studied, and I'm building things that are actually also protecting our own safety. And at that moment, I had what you call, I don't know if it's a quarter-life crisis, but I don't know how many of you had it in your mid-20s. I had it there, and it just really focused me on repurposing my mission and purpose. I wanted to make sure that I was using technology for good, using technology to close gaps of access, to help people to get better education, better healthcare, better financial access. As we know, some of the current technology, because AI, it's also very biased if you don't have the right representation, we know that there's families, Black and Latinx families, who are getting higher interest rates just because of some of that. We know that there are Black patients in the hospitals being serviced less often than white patients because of the bias. Yeah. And so I want to make sure that I'm putting my purpose and the work that I do at the Caper Center to specifically close those gaps of access, both on making sure that we're getting the right talent at the table, that once they're there, that they're also persevering, and then eventually that they start their companies. And we want to be able, in order to create those new systems I mentioned before, we really need new founders. We need more parametrics. I wish I would have known you when I was recruiting for business school, because as somebody like myself who did about 3 or 4 career pivots from engineering to business and tech consulting to then eventually doing a little bit of startup, a little bit of the social impact, and then also being able to do some lecturing, which is now my next field. I don't know how I would be able to translate all of these skills, and so I think it's super critical that we are addressing this with data, that we're addressing it in a way that it's also much more accessible and equitable for everybody.
And if I can just jump in, I mean, I think that it's interesting, right, because you're pointing out access gaps, right? But what we have to keep in mind is that these access gaps exist in reality, right? I mean, Black patients get worse care in reality. Forget about artificial intelligence. You know what I mean? Like there are less, like all of these inequalities exist now in our world. The problem with AI that doesn't take this into that is not built in an ethical fashion is that it's going to, codify and amplify this bias, right? So it's not that it's, oh, the world is perfect, we live in a utopia and everyone's treated equally. No, that's obviously not the case, as per your previous speaker, right? But the problem with AI is that once you've codified it into an algorithm, if you're not removing the biases, if you're not taking care to do that, then it's there and it's just impossible to get rid of. Do you know what I'm saying? So we have to just be mindful of that's the problem with AI, is that it is mirroring the systems that humans have created, and so that's the problem with AI.
Big problem, right?
It's a huge problem. It's a massive problem. That's why you get the Amazon resume scandal. That's why you get the Apple credit card issues. I mean, that's kind of why people have this negative perception of AI, which, by the way, is a realistic one, because it's really putting a mirror to our society and making us reflect on, I'm not really sure I like what I see. Mm-hmm. What I was going to say, though, is that I think the promise, so that's the peril of AI, the promise of AI is that an algorithm, you can audit it, right? So if I ask Lily, tell me how you arrived at this last decision that you made, I mean, Lily might give me some answers, maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong, but humans are very poor at sort of providing a printout of why I just did what I did. Versus an algorithm, you can actually have a paper trail, you can audit it. I mean, again, certain types of AI, because then if you go to, sort of neural nets and deep learning, that's not possible. But if it's explainable, you have the possibility to audit and actually remove the features that are causing these problems. So again, if we just sort of think about promise versus peril, I think that's kind of the juxtaposition there.
Since the 5th Industrial Revolution is about the interaction of machines and humans,
yep.
What is the role? One fact that struck me in preparing for this conversation is the significant decline in the number of people who work in HR departments. So we have fewer humans. Do we need, in addition to this technology, not just more humans, but a more diverse group of humans involved in these processes? Lily?
Most definitely. I think those biases are real. We all have our own lived journeys, and I think that the challenge is that when you have a homogeneous group creating technology without having different input, and specifically in the work that I do, which is working with the community, if you're not thinking of the unintended consequences, we're doing it wrong. And I think for me, specifically being a technologist, I really do think that one of the biggest ethical issues we have in tech is lack of representation. When we take a look at how right now, specifically Black and Latinx tech employees, we're less than 10%, depending on what stats you look at, in the tech workforce. But when you start to look at the demographic shift that's going to happen in about 2040, in my lifetime, and hopefully my kids' lifetime, it's going to be insane. And so we're definitely leaving a lot of talent on the table undeveloped, and that's not a good thing for anybody. Specifically, as a Latina, for me, specifically even more personal, tomorrow is Latina Pay Gap Day, so bringing that awareness where somebody like me still has to work the same amount of hours, but I only get 54 cents on the dollar. That's for doing the same job. I think that's another thing that the system is broken that we need to change. And I really see the opportunity for AI and this new innovation to actually help close some of that gap if it's done right. If we're able to include some of this talent that is on the fringes and really removing our own bias of how we evaluate the credentials, how we evaluate the actual skill building. There's so much transferable life experience that you can't put into a keyword for a resume that a recruiter will look at. It's really about how the problem solving, your creativity, your team building. Those are things that with AI or without are really powerful. And this is me speaking as a techie because we're going to start to see all of this software even get even more automated, which is going to mean that you as a person, your EQ as an individual is going to be the most important skill you bring to the table. And I think that the more diverse populations we have the more different voices, the better technology we'll have. And ultimately, we should be asking ourselves tough questions. Just because you can build it, should we build it? And just because we can scale it, should we scale it? There are some things that we just really shouldn't be building. I think that we should be really looking at this opportunity in a way of how can we create a way better future for not just the kids now, but their kids.
What are we building that we shouldn't be building?
Many things. I think one of the things, and I'll be very transparent, like earlier today, there was the keynote was disrupted by looking at how are we also looking at the ethical use of data? Who gets access to that? Specifically in the times that we're in, where a lot of our government public data sets, how it's being targeted without having the right transparency, having one company own everything, having one government entity own everything, what are the checks and balances that it should be stayed? If anything, I really do think that we really need to encourage more folks to get into tech policy. We need more talent to really start asking some tougher questions to some of the industry. Because there are some things that as you start to go in what's getting built, and if somebody is not asking those difficult questions, you're just building blindly. You're distracted by all the amazing thing that you have around you. But then you realize you're going to be like myself when I was about 26 years old, and I was like, what am I building? Am I building weapons of mass destruction? I think we can do better, and we should. And so that's my 2 cents there.
Yeah, and if I can just add to that, I mean, so I think, we've had a lot of negative examples of artificial intelligence systems that have had unintended consequences, and I don't think we need to list them all, but there have been a lot, right? So again, I'm a mom. I have 3 kids. I have 2 that are very young, so I think about toddlers, okay? And so I think a little bit of algorithms or artificial intelligence as I do my toddlers, right? Which is that, you have to, AI is like a toddler. It basically will learn from the grown-ups that are teaching it, right? And I think to date, many of the AI systems that have been built, it's sort of like saying, they've all been built by, 20-year-old single men, usually, drinking Soylent and working long hours at their desk. Imagine if all the world's toddlers had been raised by those people, right? Would they really represent the world of toddlers, right? They probably wouldn't. We'd probably have some really crazy, messed up toddlers running around. And the point is that I don't think we should then look at that and say that is what artificial intelligence can be. That is a type of artificial intelligence that has been built by a very narrow sliver of the population, to your point. And I worry that the backlash will be so strong against these artificial intelligence systems, or rambunctious, not very well-behaved toddlers, that all toddlers will be banned because, we sort of think that they can't be built differently, and that's just not the case. And I think that we really have to encourage a much broader set of people to come in and build technology. And I think that that's really important, especially in this day and age where every study that's ever been done of diversity and corporate performance shows that there's a positive link there, right? And so there's just this missing gap between the current builders of technology and the fact that the more diverse a workforce you have, the better the company performs, the better the workforce performs. So we have to build a bridge.
And my toddler in New Jersey has a British preschool teacher and is now speaking with a British accent.
Yeah, so there you go.
So I can't. Lily, let's talk about, we've talked a lot about problems and risks. Let's talk for a minute about what's working.
Great.
What's working for you at KPOR? Where are you seeing, where do you feel you're having the most impact? In which programs? And you could run us through sort of the, summary of how you are tackling these topics, but I'd love to know what's working most effectively.
Sure, definitely. And I'll share a story, actually. One of the programs that we have is Tech Hire Oakland, specifically focused on providing the opportunity for East Bay talent, specifically Oakland talent, to get in front of these big tech companies that wouldn't otherwise look at them without having certain pedigrees. And I would love to share the story of Abel, because it's one of the ones that touches my heart. I met Abel when at a startup weekend where he would come to all of our events, which is we're trying to always create ways for the local community to come and build things and learn, but learn by doing. And when you walk into the Caper Center, it's a room full of black and brown techies and amazing innovators out in Oakland. And Abel came and he really got jazzed. And before you know it, he launched his startup for over that weekend. And what was the part that I learned about him during the weekend is that he had gone through about 4 or 5 different programs out in the East Bay, where there were nonprofits that are helping him build skills from everything that's super basic to now advanced. And he went through the community college process as well, but he couldn't get to the next step. His dream was to go to UC Berkeley and major in CS. And instead, what happened, there was this nice little deviation that helped Abel get a scholarship to a coding bootcamp and then eventually got connected to an apprentice. So at 19 years old, here's Abel, zero debt, is a software engineer working side by side some of the earliest Facebook engineers. For him, this is generational wealth. At 6 figures, zero debt, 19 years old. Imagine that's the power that we're living in if we're able to get past our own bias of how we evaluate current talent.
Yep.
And I share that story because I think it's one of those areas where how many more Abels are there in the world? I hope that there's a lot. And I really do, I center a lot of the work that I do in making sure that we are creating those opportunities and those bridges to help that local talent show that they can show up, and they are, and they're building. And you know what Abel is doing now? He's trying to create more scholarship programs to bring in more students out from East Oakland to get connected to these opportunities. And I think that that's going to be the generational change that we want to continue to see. One last item, I was just going to say to some of your staff here at Time, check out some of the Caper Capital companies. For People Ops Technology, there's a lot of different software there as well to help you evaluate your candidates in different ways. A specific company I would actually showcase is Junko, because one of the areas that we struggle a lot is getting folks into the tech jobs, but then is how do they persevere? And actually, once you're actually in the job, did you know that you could actually look at how the tasks that are getting assigned to you? Just because I'm a woman, am I getting more quote-unquote administrative tasks? Am I getting the same fair level of tasks? So I think that's another type of power that we have with the technology that's currently here that's working. Yeah. This is an 140 billion opportunity, the HR market currently, and I would love to see more of those startups continue to scale and create new opportunities, because it's not just about the entry. It's really about the retention and the advancement. Yeah. That's where we'll start to see even more solutions.
And if I can just piggyback on that, I mean, so, Pymetrics is used by about 100 clients now, some really big companies using us, worldwide. And again, we see a very similar shift. So, before starting, so here are the 3 blockers to a diverse hiring outcome. So the first one is that I'm company X. I have 1 million people that apply to me, but I don't have the human recruiter capacity to evaluate all of them. So I actually only look at 200,000, right? And we hear this all the time. It is shocking. Like, the resume black hole is a thing. 80% of people are submitting their resume and it's not even getting looked at, okay? So that's problem number one. Problem number two, I'm a recruiter, I'm scanning it really quickly because I'm overworked, and I'm making decisions that unfortunately are biased against, non-dominant folks. And then the third thing is that we can actually have cognitive assessments that introduce further bias against, Black and Latinx. The point is, once you introduce an unbiased technology layer, be it Pymetrics or something else, at the top of the funnel, instead of cutting out 80% of that work, those applicants from the beginning, you were evaluating all of them. And you know what people were getting cut out in that 80%? It wasn't the Harvard students. It wasn't the people that were working at elite companies. It's the people that go to community college. It's the people that don't have that pedigreed background. It's people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, right? And so what we see is this dramatic shift in the makeup of people that are getting hired. So, we hear things like, well, and we do a lot of campus hiring. People will say, well, 75% of our, previous year's class would come from, sort of core schools, elite universities. Now only 25% are, and that's massive. Like, think about it. Like, now schools that were not even on anyone's radar screen, where people are first generation, where people are putting themselves through school, right? Like, think of all of the people that have to put themselves through school because their parents can't afford it or they're going into debt. Those are the type of people that are all of a sudden getting opportunities when you start thinking about using unbiased technology to, open the door. I mean, I always say there's a front door to hiring, there's a back door, and the front door is broken, right? And a lot of people are getting in through the back door, and we need to fix that through the use of, scalable, I think, audited, unbiased technology solutions. So,
how do you scale? The story you told, which is terrific, exciting, but how do you scale it? Right? I mean, this is you take the great work you're doing and make it.
But what I just gave you was a very, very scalable solution. I mean, we process, millions of people per year. So I think that technology, to the point that you were mentioning some of the Kapoor Center, technologies as well. I mean, I think, please, I don't mean to interrupt, but I do think that technology has to be part of the scalability solution. And again, then it goes back into like, how do you design the technology so that it's having these types of effects as opposed to the opposite type of effects, which is, the Amazon resume parser that was only, hiring white men, basically.
Is that how you're thinking about scaling what Kapoor work? Is it tech-based or how do you think about it?
Really?
It's definitely both. I think that the challenge is that also some things are just not going to be scalable, and we should be okay with that. I think when we start getting more when we start working in the community, specifically for me, working out in Oakland, especially leaving Accenture, where I was working in the tech innovation labs, and we were working in emerging tech, and I know Accenture is here as well. It was just amazing to see all this futuristic technology, and when you start to take a look at how it's actually being rolled out and adopted, it really starts one person at a time. And I think specifically working with the talent, we have to remember that it's not just the future of work, it's really the future of talent defining the meaning of work. And I really do hope that with all these new technologies, as it continues to scale, and if we use it for good in a way that's purposely closing gaps of access, we'll actually unlock even more interesting solutions and applications that will improve our lives. Specifically to get more Abels of the world, it's a complex issue, but it can be resolved. We definitely need more investment, both on the corporates, and the academia, and government. It's a hybrid approach. We need that right now. When we take a look at some of the new trends that we're seeing, there's a lot of these alternative boot camps. We're starting to see a lot of apprenticeships, but yet they're still in a very small scale. From a survey that we did, about 16 different companies, when you add them all up, sure, they have apprenticeships program, but they're totaling under 100, 150 total. This is ridiculous. These are huge, big tech companies. We need to be able to create and design better, more scalable ways to bring in the talent. And I think this is where the technology is really going to come to play. So it's a mix of both. So to answer your question, we have to definitely look at how much we're really reinvesting. Invest in the community colleges, maybe create an interesting partnership where a community college can be connected to a coding bootcamp and they work together. Or take a look at these apprenticeships programs where if you're able to develop and once you test it, you're able to scale it by using some of this technology to even find more talent at a faster rate, at a lower cost. And then that way we go from the hundreds to the thousands and eventually to the millions, where we need to be at right now. Right now there's 6 million jobs that are not spoken for. And how many of you know folks that are looking for jobs, right? So we need to solve that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we have to scale, you know what I mean? Like, I think we have to look at technology as a solution. I think we have to realize that there are problems with unvetted technology, but I think that, and there are calls for how we can make sure that technology is being built in the proper way, but we have to look at it as a solution, because otherwise, I mean, to your point, like, we are also involved in apprenticeship programs and stuff like that, but it's like tiny, just not enough people, right? And there are so many people suffering now because of their lack of access to opportunity, and I just don't think that scalable has to be synonymous with like, perpetuating inequality. I think sometimes people think that, and I think that's completely the opposite. You can actually use scalable systems to undo a lot of the challenges that we've had to date, and again, that's what we see. I mean, as I mentioned, we have millions of people going through our system. That's what we see with our system, and it just is a question of designing scalable systems that have that impact. So.
We could scale apprenticeships. I mean, a lot of countries do.
Yep. And if we think about it, apprenticeships were like I would call it the OG way back of how we were able to just get so many of the, back in World War II, being able to just mobilize towards creating some of these larger systems. And I think we can. We just need to really look at investing. And I think that's one of the parts, to your point earlier, we think that it's expensive, but it's actually more expensive not to do it. It's specifically, when the Caper Center did a research on tech leavers, there's about a 16 billion gap of waste that tech companies go in losing the talent. And so I think that there's a huge lot of money that is out there that companies are spending to recruit, to bring them on board, and yet we still lose them. And imagine if we were able to take some of that budget or even additional investment into re-education, upskilling, being able to use different of these platforms, not just at the for-profit, but also at the public sector.
What can tech companies, and here you are in the center of it all, and people in the audience, what can they do to make a difference on this issue? Frida.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, it's keeping an open mind to what technology stands for and the power that it has to do good. And again, I'm very much aligned with Lily in the sense that, again, you can argue that sometimes it's a buzzword that gets thrown around, but I really do think that there's a new crop of technologists coming up that really are very mission aligned around using technology to counter some of these challenges that we see in society and make that scalable. So I would just, say to anyone in the audience, like, keep an open mind that is a very, very real possibility. It's not just a buzzword that people are throwing around. Those systems are being created, and there are many that I can think of that are having a huge impact. So that would be my sort of take.
I think for me, we go back to the basics. If we take a look at this amazing, amazing conference and the amazing technologies that are being developed, yet when we walk out and we cross certain zip codes, there's still a huge digital divide. I think the most important thing that we can do in addition to getting the opportunities to the talent is really reinvesting in infrastructure. Yeah. Just out in West Oakland, there's work that we're doing there just to even be able to bring up Wi-Fi for the community as a big issue. Right now, like, there's stories in Oakland that I hope I never have to hear again, where there are high school students filling out college applications on their mobile apps around a free hotspot. We're in 2019 going into 2020. That should not exist. And so what I ask for the folks here is that we really look at how are we reinvesting in our local infrastructure. If you want to definitely get involved, go into your local city politics. How is the money being spent? And then take a look at aggregate at the state level as a country. Because without really closing some of these basic infrastructure digital divides, we're always going to be talking about the ones that are not in this room. And so the only way to fix it is to really create those new systems. And it starts from infrastructure. It starts with really creating more equitable access to computer science. Stats show that without access, the darker your skin is, the less access you have to computer science. And if you take a look at me as how we started the session, those stats tell me that I'm not even supposed to be in this room. I was never even supposed to be able to finish school, but here I am, right? And so we need to move forward and reinvest both infrastructure-wise, education, and being able to also leverage technology in a way that will create more opportunities at a larger scale, in a way that is not focus on how it was done in the past, but is really looking at the raw talent and the potential.
Do you see any sign that there's a shift in a commitment to investing? Public or private?
Yeah, I mean, we often see that, so if you take it back to reskilling, right, that, and we're part of the World Economic Forum community, and I think that, a lot of the partners there are very much committed to how do we reskill our workforce, right? Instead of creating this mass disruption of, letting all these people go because their, jobs have been automated, and then rehiring people. And by the way, I don't know where they're going to come from because nobody has the skills that we need. Really investing in that talent and making sure that the people that are currently working in jobs that are, at threat of automation actually have the capability and the opportunity to be reskilled. And again, then it goes back to education. I think that we need new educational models that allow for people to switch careers, switch jobs, adapt to this world of reskilling in real time, rather than needing to take X number of years or months off to basically get the skills that I need. So it's rethinking the educational model. But I think that there is, again, maybe it's just because of necessity, because again, to your point, I mean, there's so many open jobs now that people can't fill because nobody has those skills. That it's it's sort of like a new revolution. It's like people are coming to grips with this fact and saying, I need to invest in the people that I already have, right? Rather than thinking of them as sort of, fungible assets. And therefore, I think, yes, we do see a pretty significant amount of investment, at least with, the clients that we work with, so.
Definitely, at the federal level, there's supposed to be much more increased investment at a national level for apprenticeships. We also have to reinvest in who is teaching, and also making sure that we're investing in those instructors. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for companies as well to continue to reinvest. There's been several models of where companies are creating their own direct pipeline into their workforce. We may be a little bit too early to see what the results of that are, but definitely that's an example of different ways to reinvest. But I would say that we're starting to see the dollars. We just have to make sure that when those dollars get down into the cities, that they're actually being put to use in a way that's effective and that's not of waste. And this is why I go back that it's really about a strong ecosystem. From everything, a systemic, equitable ecosystem, from pre-K through 12 to post-secondary, to your getting your first tech job, to then eventually starting your own company. And I think that if we take a look at it as a whole, we'll be able to identify spots and gaps where we can leapfrog and really take advantage of all these new technologies and get those dollars to go even further.
You have a magic wand, giving you a magic wand. What, if you could wave it, what is the biggest single need you would use it biggest single need you would fill, you would try to meet to move this process forward? Is it government spending? Is it public spending? Is it STEM education at a younger stage? Is it more tech platforms like Frida's? What is the...
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. We need it all. I go back to, we are in a very turning points for a lot of generations. This is a generation that's going to determine for the next, if we get it right, because we have seen how broken our systems have been. We're in a very interesting times, from even politically, and how we're seeing some of this technology actually get mobilized and used in a way that's attacking certain communities. And so this is the time for us to really do, it's a yes and. Where everybody that's here, you matter, your voice is important, the work that you're doing is important, and we want to make sure that we are looking back at reinvesting infrastructure-wise, that we are investing in our education, that we need to be able to use technologies in a way that are much more accessible, and hopefully as technologies develop, specifically AI, we're able to get rid of some of these jobs that maybe weren't even good for our bodies, and we actually provide opportunities to unlock more geniuses and provide new pathways of how this could be done right.
Yeah, and I would say that for me, it's really giving equal access to everybody to the same economic opportunity. I mean, a job is a lifeline, right? It allows you to support your family. And if we're not allowing for everybody, forget about in the US, but in the world, to really access their potential and have that same economic opportunity, which, by the way, we are absolutely not in this day and age, and it's getting worse. And if we can't use technology and other things to stem that tide, I think we're going to be headed in the wrong direction. And again, I mean, just to be, I guess everything looks like a nail because I have a hammer, but I've got my hammer, so I'm just going to say it again. We see this daily with the platform that we've created. Like, this isn't a futuristic state. Like, this is actually happening. We are actually increasing access to opportunity for all, and it's just really, it can be extremely powerful, and it's what what motivates me to do what I do, because I've been on that, opposite end of things where I was looking at a sort of, bleak future for myself and my, child at the time, and I know what it feels like to be in that situation, and I don't want other people to be there, and we need to, as people that are now in a position of privilege and power, use all of the tools that are in our capacity to prevent that from being perpetuated. So
You're both inspiring. The work you're doing is inspiring. Who in the field inspires you?
Ooh, the field.
Can I say who
Sure.
inspires me? This is going to sound however it sounds. It's people that don't have the same access to opportunity that we do. That's who inspires me. That's what makes me do what I do. Because, again, I don't think it's people that are so hardworking and do not have the same access to opportunity that we do that keep me motivated to do what I do day in and day out. Because it's the unsung hero, really.
And if I don't say my mom, she's going to be upset.
Say your mom.
That's a separate. Love you, Mama. But it's really youth like Stephanie Tena out in Salinas, California, an AI for All alumni who went back and started a middle school AI club. And she is asking not just why, but she's asking why not? Why not me? And so I think it's really the next gen of folks who are questioning and building and getting out there that come from non-traditional backgrounds, places that, according to the stats, we're not even supposed to be here, but here we are. And the reality is that when we take a look at 2040, 2050, at least in the US, that shift is going to be very visible. And so I really encourage you all to definitely take a look at that of being able to understand what that really means. And it's time now for us to start building those bridges. And so I'm inspired by these young AI developers, enthusiasts. And so definitely it's the youth and their creativity and their power to ask questions.
Great answers, great inspiring answers. Thank you both.
Thank you.
And thank all of you.